View controllers are a very important part of iOS applications. In fact, when you're writing iOS applications, you'll discover that most of the code you're writing is actually view controller code. So the view controllers we've seen manage the screen's view hierarchy as well as the segues between view controllers if our application has multiple views. So the view controller is really the glue between the views themselves as well as the models in the MVC triad. So in particular, view controllers are responsible for initializing and setting up the data models. They also populate the view hierarchy with views, and they coordinate with the view hierarchy via the delegation pattern, and they also receive, the views also receive their data from their respective view controller using some type of data source protocol. So view controllers have what we call a life cycle. You'll recall several lectures back when we did our first kind of tire kicking exercise and had Xcode generate an application. We looked in the Swift code very briefly and we saw a couple of functions defined, which you see on the screen in front of you. Now, these are just a sampling of some of the methods that help us coordinate with the controller's lifecycle. It turns out there is a whole number of framework hook functions that we can implement in our custom view controllers that interact and help us coordinate with the controller's lifecycle. And understanding this view controller lifecycle allows us to properly manage the controller's models and views. And it all starts when the view controller's view property is accessed. So recall, a view controller has a view property, and that view property references the top level element in the view hierarchy. So when that is accessed, the following happens. First of all, the framework checks to see, does the view actually exist? And if it does, that means it's been called previously or it's been referenced previously, and the view is simply returned. But the interesting situation is when that view is non-existent. In that case, we go and call load view. And first we check, is load view overridden? So is the custom view controller, the derived view controller class, does it implement load view? And if it does, it's going to run that particular method, which in theory should be producing the view hierarchy. Now, if it hasn't been overridden, it's going to check, is there a storyboard? And if there is, it's going to go ahead and load the view hierarchy from that storyboard and ultimately call viewDidLoad, the framework hook method, on our custom view controller. And if there is no storyboard at that point, it's just going to return an empty view. So there's a number of these hook methods, and you see them on the screen in front of you. There's viewDidLoad, that's the one we've already seen in the generated code, and that gets called when the view is finished loading. And right before the view appears, viewWillAppear gets called. And right after it appears, it's going to call viewDidAppear. And similarly, when a view disappears from the screen, right before it disappears, viewWillDisappear gets called. And right after it disappears, viewDidDisappear gets called. And finally, if we run into a situation where the platform is running low on memory, it will give our view controller a hint by saying did receive memory warning. And obviously, when we get that, we would want to free up anything that we can do without. Here are several very, very common view controllers that Apple provides us in the iOS SDK. So in UIKit, we have a UI tab bar controller, and it allows us to manage multiple view controllers via a tab bar. You can see the tab buttons on the bottom. And there's also a UI collection view controller that lets us manage a collection of views. In this case, this is the actual photo roll application on your iPhone. And then probably the most common view controller of all is the UI table view controller. This controller lets us manage a scrollable list of items. The particular screenshot you're looking at there on the right is obviously the iOS settings application. Now, also very important and very commonly used is the UI navigation controller. In fact, almost inevitably, if we're using the UI table view controller, we're probably containing that or embedding that in a UI navigation controller. And the way this works is when we select one of the rows here, and it's selectable, the little greater than on the far right of each row is what we call the disclosure indicator, and it indicates there's another screen. We can drill down into the details. So in this case, if I select the Safari option on that first screen, I would do a push segue onto the Safari settings screen, which you see on the right. And notice up there on the navigation bar at the very top left, you see settings in blue. That's a button. And that's the back button. And if I click that, then I'm going to pop that view and go back to the original view. So this is UI navigation controller, and I can have these UI navigation controllers manage many child views. So I could have a whole stack of subordinate view controllers that are being managed by that UI navigation controller. In the next video, we'll take a look at a couple of different demonstrations. We'll look at a lifecycle demonstration just to give you an idea of when these framework hook methods get called. And then after that, we're going to create a simple stopwatch application demonstrating the concepts that we've learned so far. So please watch the next video.